Channel 5, Nashville.
Wallace has 3.25 million votes for 18% of the vote, a point at which he has stood for most of the evening, and that percentage has been boosted considerably by a very heavy percentage in the South. He has not done nearly so well in the border and the northern states as he had anticipated doing. In the electoral vote, Nixon has won a total of 16 states now with 128 electoral votes. Humphrey has won 9 states with a total of 114 electoral votes. And when you count those states in which they're leading, Humphrey has won or is leading for a total of 143 electoral votes, and Nixon a total of 158. 142 on the figures you see there. Let me amend that. I was reading off of another board. That would read 156 that Humphrey still needs. Nixon still needs 142 for the 270 vote total that is required to win in the Electoral College. Still undecided, 257 electoral votes. Wallace has won only in 4 deep South states. He's not leading in any of the other southern states at the moment. It would appear that this may be his grand total, and if so, he has done no better than the States' Rights Party did, a purely sectional party in 1948, for a total of 39 electoral votes in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. His percentages in many of the eastern and northern states have run 10% and less. In the Middle West, he's not doing much better than that. It would appear that his third-party bid is going down to rather ignominious failure tonight. It is now down to 17% in the popular vote, with the new figures just posted on our board. And in California, the polls have just closed. As a matter of fact, they've closed in California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, and now the polls are closed throughout the United States except in Alaska. And out there's an interesting indication of a very, very close race in that poll that we take as voters leave the polling places. There's nothing official about that, of course, yet, and none of the returns have actually been tabulated. Joe, you can tell us more about it. That's your big baby, and it looks like you're going to be in the center of this vortex as the evening comes to a smashing climax in California.
Well, I knew there was something worth waiting for, Walter. California apparently is going to be the one that's going to keep everyone awake tonight, waiting to find out what happened. One thing to add, all of the polls are closed now in the United States, except for the rural areas in Alaska. The population centers are closed. And as Walter pointed out, our poll of voters leaving polling places in California shows that that's a dead heat out there. If that's any indication, the voters coming out of the voting booths have indicated it's Nixon-Humphrey toss-up, so we'll be watching California very closely. A quick look at some of the races already decided now in the far west. First in Arizona. Richard Nixon has taken Arizona. In fact, the whole state has gone Republican. Along with Nixon, Barry Goldwater is going back to the United States Senate. Nixon, the winner in Arizona. There's the raw vote. He has about a 10,000 vote lead, and our CBS estimate shows that Richard Nixon will take the state of Arizona. Barry Goldwater, another roughly 10,000 vote lead against Roy Elson, who was the administrative assistant to Carl Hayden, the 91-year-old senator who retired this year after serving so many years, serving in the Congress, in fact, since 1912 for the state of Arizona. In Colorado, Richard Nixon takes that state's 6 electoral votes, added along to Arizona's 5. He now has 11 in the far west. His lead is sizable in the raw vote, roughly 30,000 votes. George Wallace not showing too well in either Arizona or Colorado. Peter Dominick has won his seat back in the Senate. Nixon is also leading in Idaho and in Montana. There he's leading, and that's another 11 electoral votes when you add it to Wyoming, and we do have some raw votes now on Wyoming. It shows Richard Nixon with roughly a 4,000 vote lead over Hubert Humphrey in Wyoming. So Richard Nixon now is taking what it was expected he would take outside of California, a pretty commanding lead in the far west, and California, of course, with its 40 electoral votes, is really what we're all waiting to see. If as this returns start coming in across the nation, it seems that California once again is going to be a pivotal state. It's 40 electoral votes, nearly half of what the West has to offer to any presidential candidate, and the whole West giving roughly a third of the electoral votes needed. Walter?
Because it's some time before we get over to you again, Mike, I'm going to reveal the truth about the Maryland senatorial race, if I may. That is, the truth as CBS News estimates it to be, that the incumbent, Senator Brewster, the Democrat, has been defeated in Maryland by the Republican challenger, Mr. Mathias. The CBS News estimate is that Mathias will get 48% of the vote and that Daniel Brewster will get just 39%, with George Mahoney, a perennial candidate in Maryland, but a popular figure in some sets there, 13% of the vote. And clearly, with that sort of a percentage, Mike, I'm sure that you will read that as well, that Brewster would have won if Mahoney hadn't taken votes away from him. Pennsylvania, here is the big one. CBS News estimates that in Pennsylvania, Hubert Humphrey will win that state with 49% of the vote. Richard Nixon will get 43% of the vote, and Wallace will get 8% of the vote. 29 big electoral votes for Hubert Humphrey, according to our CBS News estimate, in Pennsylvania. That will give him a total of 143 electoral votes to Nixon's 128 electoral votes at this point. Mike Wallace?
Walter, with 99% of the vote reporting in Philadelphia, Humphrey pulled a 263-vote margin in that city, and the Democrats said that they were going to need a 250,000 vote margin in Philadelphia to carry the state. They have done it. That big, did I say something wrong? The Democrats said they would need a 250,000 vote, 250,000 votes. They got 263,000 plurality in the city of Philadelphia. That plurality made possible by a big turnout for Humphrey in the Negro and Jewish areas, with the Negro vote turnout higher than usual. The only weak spot was in the Italian areas, which might be sensitive to racial issues, where Republicans did somewhat better than normal, and it is conceivable that in Pennsylvania, that is what is making the difference in the race between the incumbent Democratic Senator Joseph Clark and Congressman Richard Schweiker, the Republican. Let's take a look at that Pennsylvania board. With now 1/3 of the vote tabulated in Pennsylvania, Schweiker is leading 792,000 to 745,000 for Clark. Senator Clark has had his difficulty with the big Italian community in Pennsylvania. He has made, over the period of the past 2 or 3 years, disparaging remarks about other Democrats of Italian origin. And then, in addition, he was for gun control legislation that was a little stiffer than the gun control legislation that Schweiker was for in the state of Pennsylvania. And so 1 million sportsmen in western Pennsylvania particularly organized against Joe Clark, and it begins to look as though Schweiker may be going down. Clark may be going down before Republican Richard Schweiker, in spite of the fact that Humphrey now has taken the state of Pennsylvania in 29 big votes, and it looks like a big, big Democratic sweep throughout the eastern area.
And in the popular vote, Humphrey has lengthened his lead by a few score thousand votes, 8,318,000 now to Nixon's 8,223,000, but still both of them with 41% of the votes. And here's a CBS News estimate of the presidential vote in Wyoming. Nixon will win Wyoming as anticipated with 58% of the vote, Humphrey 33, and Wallace 9. That is our anticipation. That will give Nixon 131 electoral votes to Humphrey's 143. And it is indeed a close race tonight. CBS News color coverage of election night 68 will continue in a moment.
After Millie ironed her cottons, she'd take on the synthetics. How did you know when her iron was cool enough? She rarely did. Until she got her Westinghouse fabric scope iron, the only iron with a heat indicator that tells you when it's safe to start ironing. Get a Westinghouse fabric scope, the iron that's safe for fabrics, and relax.
No matter how nice and shiny a coffee maker looks on the outside, it's the inside that makes the coffee. And on the inside, they're all about the same. Except for this one, the Westinghouse pressure flow coffee maker. The basket on this one really is different. It's golden and upside down. The hot water is forced down through the coffee grounds under pressure, so you get more flavor out of every bean and every cup. You can be sure if it's Westinghouse.
karate training school. These trainees are learning how to defend themselves in case they apply too much high karate after shave or cologne. If someone gives you some high karate, but you don't have time for special training, don't worry. There's a cram course on self-defense in every package. Regular and Oriental Lime. High karate. Be careful how you use it.
On the right, a man shaving with a leading stainless steel blade. On the left, a man with a Norelco triple header. The shaver with a record of shaving as close or closer than a blade in 2 out of 3 shaves. Right on the chin. Those micro-groove floating heads really follow his face. Another right to the sideburns. But look at that pop-up trimmer. Here's the decision. It's Norelco. The Norelco triple header is the winner. Norelco is the winner. Norelco.
This shapes up as one of the closest presidential races in our nation's history. As of this point, with 1/4 of the nation's precincts in, Nixon and Humphrey 41% of the vote each, and Wallace 18% of the vote each, with Nixon with 131 electoral votes and Humphrey 143 electoral votes in those states that CBS News has estimated have been won by one of the candidates or the other. Wallace, the third-party candidate, not doing as well as expected with 39 electoral votes. And now, Roger Mudd, let's take a look at the South.
Walter, we have 4 states in the South where an election either has not been called or there's no trend established, and the 4 are Tennessee, Arkansas, South Carolina, and Texas. First, in Tennessee, in the presidential race, 83% of the popular vote is now in, and Richard Nixon has a lead over Wallace, but not really very much. Hubert Humphrey running a poor third. Wallace has carried the city of Nashville, Humphrey carried Memphis, and Richard Nixon the other smaller cities in Tennessee. In Arkansas, in the presidential race, with 11% of the returns in, Wallace has a lead. No, he doesn't. Humphrey has a lead there, 13,000, almost 14,000 votes. Wallace right behind him, and then Nixon running third. In the South Carolina presidential race, 62% of the popular vote in. Nixon is in the lead there, probably due in large measure to the efforts of Strom Thurmond. In the Texas presidential race, 28% of the popular vote in. Hubert Humphrey leading, 324,000 votes. In second place, Nixon, and in third place, George Wallace. So to recap the Southern electoral count at this time, with Nixon winning 56 electoral votes, leading with 19 for a possible total of 75, George Wallace having won 39, Hubert Humphrey not yet having won any. And in 3 Southern Senate races in Oklahoma, Mike Mulroney, in the Senate since 1950, defeated tonight by the former governor, Republican governor of Oklahoma, Henry Bellman. In the Arkansas senatorial race, William Fulbright, going after his 5th term, looks like an easy winner over Charles Bernard, the wealthy Delta planter. And in South Carolina, we have a CBS News estimate, Ernest Fritz Hollings, re-elected and elected to his first full 6-year term over Republican Marshall Parker, the man he beat 2 years ago by about 12,000 votes. So that's the report in the South. Walter?
All right, let's take a look at the Middle West then with Dan Rather.
Walter, in the Middle West, Hubert Humphrey, according to CBS News estimates, has won in Michigan and Minnesota. All the rest of the Midwest belongs, as expected, to Richard Nixon. No surprises anywhere so far tonight, except that Illinois, Ohio, and Missouri are still out, and there's every indication that they are very close. First, let's go to the board in Illinois. With 19% of the vote counted in Illinois, Hubert Humphrey leads Richard Nixon, with George Wallace running third. Our CBS News estimates, it's simply too close at the moment to come out with anybody even leading in Illinois, and that in itself is somewhat of a surprise. And I might point out that Chicago, as usual, appears to be the key in this close race, the presidential race. And the CBS News analysis of returns from sample precincts shows that Humphrey, even though he is winning 6 out of every 10 Chicago votes, is running at a slower pace in Chicago than John Kennedy did in 1960. Now, why is that important? Simply because Kennedy won Chicago by more than 450,000 votes in 1960, but managed to carry Illinois by less than 9,000 votes. And that, in the suburbs, small towns and rural areas, Nixon is winning by about the same ratio as Humphrey is in Chicago. That could be important as the night goes along. Hubert Humphrey on the basis of our sample precincts, is not running as well in Chicago as John Kennedy did in 1960. And at this early stage, we can say that's just one indication that Illinois may yet go Republican. Now, let's look at Ohio, also with 26 electoral votes and with 36% of the vote counted in Ohio. Very close there. Nixon leading in Ohio, razor-thin margin over Humphrey. George Wallace, as expected, running well in Ohio. It was assumed before the polls closed that any votes that Wallace got in Ohio would be taking votes away from Hubert Humphrey. Again, though, in Ohio, a substantial number of our CBS News sample precincts are in, and it's simply too close for us to spot a trend or indicate that anyone is even leading. And those are the two big electoral giants in our area, Illinois and Ohio, and nowhere is the seesaw nature of this race any more apparent than it is in those two big states. Now, in Missouri, which has 12 electoral votes and is the only other state still not called as far as our CBS News estimates are concerned, this is the actual vote total. Humphrey leading in Missouri with 45% of the actual vote in. George Wallace running third and not running nearly as well in Missouri as many Wallace supporters had expected. Now, once again, our CBS News sample precincts, we have a good many of them in, but things are too close in Missouri for us to spot a trend or even call anyone leading. And that's the general picture in the Midwest, Walter, as far as the presidential race is concerned. Illinois and Ohio, the two important ones, still out. And if we may add here in Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson has won the Wisconsin senatorial race, and in South Dakota, Farrar has won the gubernatorial race there. Hearns has been elected in Missouri.
And CBS News estimates that another prominent incumbent Democratic senator has been upset tonight in the state of Pennsylvania. Senator Joseph Clark, having lost to the Republican challenger, Richard Schweiker, with a percentage of 52 votes. CBS News estimates that when the final votes are in, Schweiker will have 52% of the vote, just about the vote that showed in the tabulated figure there, and Clark 46% of the vote. Mike Wallace will have more to tell us about that in a moment. That means that in 16 Senate races where CBS News has estimated a winner, the Republicans have gained 5 seats. That's doing even better than they had anticipated. In Arizona, Barry Goldwater won the seat vacated by Carl Hayden. In Florida, Republican Edward Gurney won the seat given up by George Smathers. And in Oklahoma, former Governor Bellman defeated Democratic Senator Mike Monroney. In Maryland, Charles Mathias Jr. ousted Democratic incumbent Daniel Brewster. And in Pennsylvania, Republican Richard Schweiker beat Senator Joseph Clark. In Montana, CBS News estimates that in the Montana presidential race, Richard Nixon will win Montana, as had been anticipated, 51%, Humphrey 41%, and Wallace 8%, which is quite a bit lower than it had been anticipated Wallace might get in Montana. CBS News color coverage of election night 68 will continue in a moment.
Too soft.
Too hard.
Too hard.
Too soft.
Too hard.
People shopping for a new mattress usually want two things, firmness and comfort.
Too soft.
The problem is finding both qualities in one mattress. Some mattresses are park bench hard,
Too hard.
while other mattresses you think are really comfortable are much too soft.
Too soft.
Too soft.
Luckily, there is one mattress that's firm without being hard and comfortable without being soft. The Sealy Posturepedic. Posturepedic is the mattress designed in cooperation with leading orthopedic surgeons for firm support. Posturepedic promises no morning backache from sleeping on a too soft mattress and no park bench feeling from sleeping on a too hard mattress. The one and only Posturepedic, made only by Sealy.
And now Hubert Humphrey's margin has increased enough to give him a 1% lead over Richard Nixon. With 42% of the vote, Nixon 41%, and Wallace 17%, another 1% drop in the Wallace vote. That is with 28% of the nation's precincts counted. With that Montana 4 electoral votes that CBS News estimated Nixon would get a moment ago, Nixon's total is now 141, Humphrey 143. The electoral vote very tight indeed. And let's now continue our look around the country. We've had reports from the South and from the Middle West. Let's take a look at the West now. with senatorial, gubernatorial, as well as the presidential races from Joe Benny.
Well, Walter, we just had another call, presidential call in Oregon. Richard Nixon has taken the state of Oregon. He should have 53% of the vote, 52%. Hubert Humphrey, 43%. Wallace, 5%. Oregon's 6 electoral votes, therefore, to Richard Nixon now gives him 24 out of the 95 in the far west, and 5 states in his column. Humphrey not leading in any yet. And bad news for the Doves and the left liberals in the Democratic Party. Wayne Morse appears to be going down to defeat. Seeking his 5th term in Oregon, Morse is now trailing Robert Packwood, the 36-year-old state legislator. We don't have any raw vote on it, but this is the way it's coming out now with 69% of our sample precincts in from Oregon. Packwood should get 54% of the vote, Wayne Morse 46%. And in almost every area in the state, Morse has been trailing, except in low income, high Democratic places where he thought he would do very well. He has done very well, but in most of the rest of the state, cities such as Salem, he has done well, and in Portland, but then outside of that, the other large cities in the suburbs, Packwood has racked up a substantial lead, and Wayne Morse appears to be going down to defeat tonight. Packwood in the lead in Oregon. Richard Nixon has taken the state of Oregon and its 6 electoral votes. We're still waiting for our returns for California, Walter.
And in the popular vote, some new figures just posted with 29% of the electoral vote in now. Hubert Humphrey, 9,797,000 for 42% of the vote. Nixon, 9,597,000 for 41% of the vote. A little increased margin for Hubert Humphrey there. This is Walter Cronkite at our CBS News election headquarters.
This